Hey, this is Ralph, and in this video I want to work on an assignment that we've got where we need to do some data analysis in Excel. And it can be kind of tricky because there are some logic functions, if functions, and or a little bit of date calculation. They're not in and of themselves difficult, but I doubt you've seen them before or used them before. So it can be a little bit tricky when you're experimenting with new Excel functions. So I'm in our class homepage in Canvas. I'm going to head over to Modules. And let's see, this is all the way down here in week 8, I believe. So it's the assignment, Excel Analyzing Data Projects. I'm going to go and click on this, which will open up the directions. I'm going to click on this, which will take us to where we can download a zip file that has them. There's actually two parts to this. I'm going to be focusing on part 2 here. But there's a couple of working files and a couple of directions files. I'm going to go ahead and download these. And there we go. Let me go into my downloads folder. There it is. There's the zip file. I'm going to right click on that zip file and I'm going to extract all, extract, and there's the uncompressed folder. And if I open up that folder, I can see that I've got 2 directions files and 2 working files. Again, I'm going to focus on part 2. So I'm going to go and open up the part 2 working file. And there it is, and I'll just move that off to the side for a moment. And I'm going to open up the part 2 directions, which is a Word document, and there it is. And don't need that. And let's see, I'm going to just Windows left arrow and put those directions off to the side. There's my Excel file. And I'm going to, let's see, what do I want to do here? I want to take and just make the directions a little bit smaller. I know those are going to be tougher to see, but I want to have them both kind of displayed. I'll draw attention to what I'm looking at a particular time as we go through this assignment. So I've got the Excel file handy and convenient, and I've got my directions off to the side. Now, with these kinds of assignments, you're following along with the directions in order to modify or tweak a working file. Then you'll save it and you'll turn it in when you're done. So I've got this Excel file and I see there's a client invoices sheet tab. There's also a quarter 3 sales sheet tab. I'm looking over the directions and I'm going to focus my attention first over here. Now let's see, I want a highlighter. So I'll just do that. So I know these are too tiny for you to read yourself on your screen, but go to the Client Invoices worksheet, which is where I'm at, in cell B3, insert a formula using the date function. So I'm going to click on cell B3 and put a date. I'm going to zoom in even more on this though, so this Excel part is kind of big. There we go. Okay, so they want me to put a date in here. Now, normally I would just type the date in myself, and they want June 1st, 2024. Normally I would just do June 1st, 2024. Perfectly sufficient in practically all situations, but they want us to use a function instead. So I'm going to delete that. I'm going to write equals date parentheses. So this is the start of the date function. Now with the date function, you put in those pieces of information, month, day, and year, but you have to put them in the right order. And the screen tip on here tells me the order they should be in. The first, the year, 2024, comma, and then I want the month, which is June 6, comma, and then the day, which is 1. There we go. So we're pretending the current date is June 1st, 2024. Now, if we really wanted the current date, this is not a good realistic reason to use the date function. If I really wanted the current date, I would use the equal today function with an empty set of parentheses, and that would put in today's date. It's March 2nd, 2023. That's when I'm recording this. But we're going to pretend for this assignment that we're going to be putting in a specific date, 2024, comma, June, comma, 1. There we go. So we're pretending today is June 1st, 2024. And that takes care of step 1. And and they want it to display month, day, 4-digit year, which is what we've got. Great. All right, I'm going to turn off that highlighting, and now I'm going to focus my attention on step number 2. So in step 2, let's see, I'm just kind of reading ahead to see what we're going to get ourselves into here. We're going to write a formula that calculates days in between two dates. Well, dates are just numbers formatted to look like dates. January 1st, 1900 is 1. January 2nd, 1900 is 2. Every date converts to some number. So for instance, if I click on June 1st, 2024, and I change this out to a general formatting, I can see that that number, that date, June 1st, 2024, is 45,444 days from January 1st, 1900. And because dates are numbers, we can calculate with dates. We can take one date minus another date to find out how many days are in between. Or we can take a date and we could add 5 to it and see what that date would be 5 days in the future, or 50 days in the future, or 500 days in the future. All right, I'm going to Control Z to change that formatting back. So they want me to calculate with some dates in cell F6. So I'm going to activate cell F6, which is all the way on the far right side. Let me scroll over just a bit. I want to be able to see a few things over here though. So I'm focusing my attention on F6. Insert a formula without using a function that subtracts the invoice date, B6, from the current date, B3. So I'm going to write equals B3, but I'm going to press my F4 key on my Windows machine to make that an absolute reference, because I know that we're going to be copying the same formula down, and B3 is where my current date is, and I want to use that exact same cell reference in all of my formulas. So I'm making it an absolute reference. My Windows machine, I just press the F4 key. On your Mac, I believe it's Command T. And I'm going to subtract B6. Now that's going to change, so I want that to stay a relative reference. And when I press my Enter key, I can see that this due date of April 14th, 2024 is basically, oh, here we go. That's what I'm subtracting over here. Did I do that right? I did B, right? I did. B3 minus B6. That looks good. This is the date here. So basically, today's date of June 1st is 78 days after the invoice date of March 15th. Hey, that's the Ides of March, I believe. Okay, so now that we've got that calculation written properly, B3 minus B6, I'm going to click on this cell and use my fill handle to drag all the way down to F15. But before I'm done, I let go of the mouse button. I'm going to click this little button down here, and I'm going to fill without formatting, because I did kind of glance ahead and I can see for step 2B, use an absolute reference, did that, and then step 2C was use the fill handle to copy down and fill the range without formatting. So now everything is preserved, and if I click on any one of these formulas, B3 minus B8, and another one is B3 minus B11, and another one is B3 minus B13. So that absolute reference ensures that the B3 reference is going to be the same for all of those formulas going down. Okay, so that takes care of step number 2. I'm just going to kind of scroll down here and focus my attention on step 3. And let me just go and highlight that with green. Okay, in column G is right over here, days overdue. It's over on the far right. Okay, in column G, Brett wants to calculate the number of days the invoice is overdue. If the age of the invoice is greater than 30, it's overdue. Calculate the days overdue as follows. Okay, so we're going to use an if function to determine if the invoice is overdue. And it looks like 30 is the critical day. So before going into too many details on all these little sub-steps, I'm going to just show you the basic structure here of an if function. So let me scroll a little bit more to the right. I'm going to focus on days overdue, and I'm going to write equals if function has 3 basic parts. The logical test, which is going to be a comparison. Is it equal to, greater than, less than, greater than or equal to? And if that's true, we do one thing. Otherwise, we do something else. So if the age of the invoice is greater than 30, comma, well, if it's true that the age of the invoice is greater than 30, then I'm going to just say quotation, late quotation, comma. Otherwise, quotation, okay, quotation, closing parentheses. So if the invoice is more than 30 days late, then I'm going to display the word late. Otherwise, I'm going to display the word okay. Now, this isn't the if function they want, but it's getting close. It's the meat of it. There we go, and that one's late. And if I scroll this down a bit, I can see that, oh, practically all of them are late, but we do see some that are less than 30 days past, so they are not considered late. They're only late if they're more than 30 days out. Okay, but that's not what they want us to do. They don't want to display the word late or the word okay. They want something else in there. Let's see. Insert a formula using the if function that tests whether the age of the invoice cell F6 is greater than 30. So we've got that part as our logical test. Is F6 greater than 30? It's either true or it's false. Okay. 3B. If it's true, if the age of the invoice is greater than 30, then we're supposed to subtract the due date E6 from the current date B3. Okay, so instead of the word late showing up, I'm going to delete that, and I'm going to put in B3, pressing my F4 key to make that absolute, minus E6. Okay, so let me scroll to the left a little bit so we can see a little bit better what I'm doing here. So I'm not displaying the word late. Instead, I'm taking B3, which is our, where is it at? There it is. It's our current date, minus E6, which is our due date. And of course, I'm using B3 as an absolute reference because I know I'm going to be using that same B3 reference in a bunch of different formulas. Okay, now of course I got rid of the quotation marks too. You only need quotation marks in an if function if you want to display literal text. If you want to display a number or a calculation, you don't use the quotation marks. Okay, so what if it's false? What if it's not greater than 30? If the age of the invoice is less than or equal to 30, which means it's not greater than 30, display a 0. So I just have to put a 0 right there. That was easy. Use an absolute reference in the B3 formula. Done. Use the fill handle to copy down and fill without formatting. So I press enter. I get a number. I click on this. And I use my fill handle. Just make sure I'm still recording. My Zoom session just ended on me, but I think everything is okay. All right, so I use my fill handle and I auto-fill this down. Let's see if I can get this again. There, wait. Nope, I'm not getting the right cursor. There we go. All the way down, and I'm going to use this little button to say fill without formatting. So now I can see when certain days are, or when certain invoices are late, and I can also see how late they are. So a couple of them are 48 days late, 30 days late, a couple of them are only 1 day late, and a couple of them are not late at all. So they're 0 days overdue. All right, feels pretty good. Let's look at step number 4. Now in step 4, I'm going to go ahead and highlight this one. And I will highlight as yellow. I'll zoom in a little bit more on that. Brett sends an email reminder to clients with an overdue invoice for amounts more than $1,000. Provide a quick way to identify those clients as follows. Okay, so we're over here in column H for the email column. In step 4A, in cell H6, that's where I'm working, H6, insert a formula using the AND function. AND function is also a logic function like if, similar to if, but a little different. AND function that returns true if the number of days is overdue, if the number of days overdue is greater than 0, and the invoice amount is greater than 1,000. So the way the AND function works is we're looking at 2 or more logical tests. The if function has 1 logical test. The AND function can have 2, 3, 4 more. And for an AND function to return true, all the various tests need to be true. So I'm going to write equals and parentheses. And my first logical test is going to be if the number of days overdue, G6, is greater than 0. All right. So I'm going to click on G6, greater than 0, comma. The other logical test is if the invoice amount, which is D6, is greater than 1,000, closing parentheses. So there's two tests. Is the days overdue greater than 0? And is the amount owed greater than 1,000? And both of these things need to be true for us ultimately to get a true response. I'm going to go ahead and press my Enter key. And Excel displays the word true. So the if function, the and function, the or function, they basically return true and false scenarios. But with an if function, we often customize what that true and false is going to be. Now, of course, we could be really fancy, and you can combine an and function with an if function or an or function with an if function and make some very complicated nested logic functions. But it doesn't look like we have to do that, at least at this phase. I'm going to autofill this down. And I'm going to fill without formatting. I actually didn't see that in the directions, but I'm assuming. And let's just double check. Use the fill handle to fill it down, fill without formatting. Good. Okay, let me just look at a couple of these. So the first one is a true because the days overdue is greater than 0 and the amount is greater than 1,000. Now this other one is false. The days overdue is greater than 0. However, the amount owed is not greater than 1,000. So since both of those statements are not true, the result is a false. You need two trues to equal a true in this scenario using the and function. So I think we're doing good. Now I'm going to start to look at step number 5, and I'm going to go ahead and select that. Change out my highlighting to bright green. Brett assigns each client a rating of A, B, or C depending on the number of days an invoice is overdue. Display this information using a nested if function. Okay, so we have a nested if function. Now, nested if functions are quite a bit weird. They're a little bit unusual. However, there could be a better way for us to do this. So a nested if function is when you do an if function as one of the scenarios of a parent if function, an if within an if. And you can do ifs within ifs within ifs within ifs within ifs. And because people were doing this, Excel came out with an ifs function, IFS, instead of just IF. Now, it looks like this assignment, which is produced by Cengage, they're not factoring in the more recently developed ifs function, IFS. That's kind of a bummer. So I'm going to show you how to do this using the ifs function. It's a little bit newer technique. It uses a better function. It's going to be more efficient. And I'm going to be bypassing the nested if scenario. Or maybe we'll do it both ways, just so you can really appreciate the difference. Because some students doing this, they'll probably be turning their work in via Cengage. MindTap, and so it's going to kind of automatically check. Other students might just be turning in their file to me, or I can look at it and I'll be able to see, either way how you got that to perform correctly. So I think I might end up doing this both ways. So we're going to be using an if function for sure either way, but it could be an if function, IF, or an ifs function, IFS. In cell I6, let me start on I6 here. And of course, with any of these functions, by the way, notice we're writing them properly once so that we can just copy them down to all of the other rows. So it doesn't matter if we're working with 10 clients, 100 clients, or 1,000 clients. If we write our functions and formulas properly one time, we can just copy and paste. In cell I6, insert a formula using an if function to test whether the days overdue in cell G6 are less than 1 and display a rating of A if the condition is true. Let's take this in stages. So I'm going to go to rating equals if, parentheses. If the days overdue in cell G6 are less than 1. So if G6, right there, is less than 1, comma, we get an A. And we have to put that in quotes because we're actually writing in the letter A. Comma, now this is where the nested function would come into play, but I'm just going to pretend I don't know what that's supposed to be yet. So I'll just go ahead and do a comma or else. So if G6 is less than 1, they're going to get an A. Otherwise, they're going to get an or else. I'll just press my enter key. And I'm going to go ahead and fill this down, and I'm going to fill without formatting, even though I'm definitely not done. And so I can see that there's a couple of customers that have an A rating because their days overdue is less than 1. Whereas these other customers, they're an or else. Something else needs to take place. So let me go back to this first customer, this first client, and I'm going to scroll a little bit more to my right here so I can see the key information, but also have more room for you to see. And just to be sure, I'm on I6. I'm working on this first rating here. So if G6 is less than 1, we display a letter A. Now in step 5b, the next condition uses another if function to test whether the days overdue and G6 is less than 30 and displays a rating of B if the condition is true. So instead of the or else with the quotes, I'm going to delete that. And I'm going to do another if function. Now notice when I do a function inside of another function, I don't do the equal sign again. It's just the word if. And so that I don't forget later, I'm going to go ahead and do an opening and closing set of parentheses. That'll make sure that I get the parentheses for the nested function without forgetting about them. So the parent function has parentheses and the nested function has parentheses. And then I can focus in on this nested function. Now I am going to escape for a moment. I'm going to zoom in. I'm going to make this a little bit larger. And let me bring this back over here. Go back into here, and instead of or else, if, set of parentheses. Okay. Put my cursor, my insertion point, right in those nested if function parentheses. If G6 is less than 30, comma, then I get a B, comma, I get or else, closing quote. So I have an if function as the false scenario of a parent if function. I'm going to press my enter key. All right, and I'm going to autofill this down, and I'm going to fill without formatting. There we go. So we can see a couple customers A rating because they are less than 1 day overdue. Other customers are a B rating because they are less than 30 days overdue, but they're not less than 0 or not less than 1. And of course, now we have to deal with these other customers. So I'm going to go back to this function, and instead of the or else, I'm going to delete that, and I'm going to do another if, and then an empty set of parentheses. So we have an if function, which is nested within an if function, which is nested within an if function. And the other one, the last one, display a rating of, let's see, oh, you know what? I don't have to do it this way because we only have 3 possible scenarios, A, B, or C. So I really don't even need to do this if parentheses there. All I need is quotation, C, quotation. Because we only have 3 possible scenarios. If days overdue is less than 1, they're an A. Otherwise, are they less than 30? If so, they're a B. Otherwise, they're a C. So I really don't need that third if function. I'm going to press my enter key. And if I fill this down, and make sure I fill without formatting, there we go. So we have our C clients, our B clients, and our A clients. So there is my nested if function. Now that wasn't as bad as I was thinking. I was going to need 3 if functions. I only needed 2 if functions. So that's actually not terribly complicated. One if is nested within a parent if. So now I'm not sure if our ifs function, IFS, will actually be shorter. It might be shorter, but probably not by much. But I'm curious. I want to compare the two. So there's my first one. I'm going to just press enter. And I'm going to kind of break my formula here or my sheet for a minute. I'm just going to insert a new column right in here. I'm going to call this one rating. So I've got my old one. That's still accurate. That's got my nested if. But now I want to do another one with the ifs function, IFS. And let's see what we can do here. Equals ifs with an S. Now with the ifs function, you don't actually have to do an if within an if. You can actually have multiple logical tests right outside. Now because, like again, this first nested if was not terribly long, so I don't think we're actually going to really save much time and effort here, but let's try it anyway so we know for sure. My first logical test is if the days overdue is less than 1, comma. Now if that's true, we get an A, in quotes of course, comma. Now my next logical test is going to be if G6 is less than 30, comma, quotation B, quotation. So now we're just testing for this. Now if I just do a comma, I don't think I have a catch-all. I can't remember if there's a catch-all false with the ifs statement. So I might just have to do if G6, and I could do something really big, like less than 1,000, comma, then we get a C, and finish that off. So my ifs function is actually kind of a bit longer, but maybe you like the structure of this a little bit better. If G6 is less than 1, we get an A. If G6 is less than 30, we get a B. If G6 is less than 1,000, we get a C. Now the only other thing I'm concerned about is this in an appropriate order? Because obviously 48 is, or the number 17 is less than 1,000, I'm sorry, is less than 30 and less than 1,000. But I'm pretty sure the way the ifs function works is the first thing that hits true, it's going to stop right there. So I'm going to press my enter key and we get a C, and I'm going to fill this down, and I'm going to fill without formatting, and there we go. So we're end up getting the same results to rate these various clients, C's, B's, and A's. One of them we use the ifs function, and the other one we use a nested if function. And technically, I guess my nested if function is a little bit shorter than the ifs function, but perhaps the logic of the ifs function makes more sense to you. Okay, I'm going to leave both of them on there for now. I don't think they're hurting anything, but I will make them the same look, and I guess those are centered, so I will also center those. So now they look even more similar. Now there's a chance I might be breaking something from earlier, but I think we're okay here. So two different ways to do those if functions, especially if you need a nested if. I'm going to look at step number 6. And I will highlight this in yellow. Clients are eligible for a discount if they have a rating of A or do not require an email reminder. So we have an OR function. So some of our clients are A clients, and some of our clients do not need an email notification, that true false. So we're going to do an OR function here, which is pretty much like an AND function. If you can do an AND function, you can do an OR function. With an AND function, all of the items need to be true, all of the logical tests. But with an OR function, only one of them needs to be true. In cell J6, so I'm going to work, okay, so already since I have that column I in there, these are a little bit wacky looking. So that I don't get confused with my directions, I'm going to actually delete my column I, which has my cool ifs function in it. I'm going to go ahead and delete that. So now everything should be kind of back the way it was supposed to be. In J6, and I think this is all I need to see here, insert an OR function. So I'm going to do equals OR. Oh, I got to spell the word OR. There we go. OR that returns true if the rating in cell I6 equals A or the email reminder equals false. Okay, so I want if I6 is equal to A, comma, or if H6 equals false, closing parentheses. Now, a little bit earlier, I told you that when you want literal text to show up, you have to put it in quotes, like I did with the letter A. True and false are special. Those are Boolean responses, and true and false do not need to be enclosed in quotation marks. Very, very confusing, yes. But now we have a situation where in order to get a discount to be true, only one of these two scenarios needs to be true. Either the rating needs to be an A, which we can tell by this customer that's not the case, or the email notification needs to be false. That's also not the case. So this first customer is not going to be getting a discount. If I press my enter key, I see a false, meaning no discount. And if I autofill this down, and of course I do this without formatting, we can see that some customers do get a discount. Let's see. Here's a customer that gets a discount. Even though they have a lower rating, they do not get an email notification. That's false. So the false in the C still leads to true because of the false over here. Who else does not get a discount? Here's a C rating, but they do get an email. So that is a tricky one to look at, but with an OR function, either the rating is an A or the email notification is a false. All right, I think that takes care of step 6. Now step 7 and 8 and 9, they look a lot shorter to read. I'm going to go ahead and highlight all 3 of these together, even though they do have us doing some new things. And I'll highlight all those as green. Oops, that's too tough to read though. Let me highlight them as bright green. No. Control Z, undo. They're selected. Font. There we go. Brett likes to keep track of the total number of current invoices he has sent to clients. In cell B17, I can't even see B17. There's B17, all the way down here. In cell B17, enter a formula using the count function that counts the invoice numbers, the range A6 to A15. I happen to know the fact that the count function counts cells with numbers. So for instance, if I have 5, 10, and the word 10, and then I do equals count, you can't see that too well, there we go, equals count parentheses, and I just select these cells, my result is 2 because only 2 of these cells contains numbers. So the count function counts numbers. I'm going to right click on that row and delete it. Hopefully I didn't break something there. Okay, so in B17, count A6 through A15. So I'm going to do equals count, and then I'm going to select A6 through A15, and then I'm going to do a closing parentheses and enter, and we get a total invoice of 10. Great. Step 8. Brett also likes to keep track of the approximate amount he has billed clients. In cell B18, enter a formula using the round function and the sum function that totals the invoice amounts in the range D6 to D15. Round the results to the 0 decimal places, whole number. First, I'm just going to do a sum function. We can do that pretty easily. Equals sum, and I'm summing up D6 through D15. I could just type that in, or I could select them, D6 through D15. There it is. Close parentheses, and there's the sum function. But they want us to round. So I'm going to edit this formula. And after the equal sign, but before the sum function, I'm going to write the round function with an opening parentheses. So the round function has 2 parameters. The first part is the thing that I'm rounding. I'm rounding the sum of those numbers, the sum of those cells. And I do a comma, and I tell Excel where I want to round to. Now, if I round to 0, which is actually, I think, what they want, that means it's going to round to a whole number. So I could just do a closing parentheses, press enter, and now my sum rounds to 10,406. Now I could have done something like a -2 here, and that's going to round 2 places to the left of the decimal. This is not what they want, but it's something we could do. And now it rounds to 10,400. I could round 3 places to the left of the decimal, and now it rounds to 10,000. Or I could do a +3, and it's going to round 3 places to the right of the decimal, so it's actually going to show if I had more decimals, it would just round to 73. That's a little bit unsatisfying because we're just dealing with currency amounts that only have 2 decimal places there. But that's the way that works. So I'm going to round to 0, which is a whole dollar amount, and there we go. Of course, I don't need to see decimals. And I can't remember, I think I had decimals before to show up. Round results to the 0 decimal places. Yeah, I think that's fine. So $10,406 in invoices amongst 10 clients. Step number 9, go to the Q3 sales worksheet, which is a separate worksheet tab down here. Let me zoom in on that. I haven't done anything with this one. Apply the accounting number format to the sales amounts range B6 to B11. So I select B6 through B11, and I apply the accounting number format. So I go up here where it says General, and I can choose Accounting. There we go. Gives us a fixed $sign, which I'm kind of fond of, as opposed to the floating point $sign. Oh, that was pretty easy. All right, we're on step number 10. And I'm going to change this, highlight it in yellow. Brett wants to calculate the percentage of each category of insurance contributed. Okay. To his total sales, because he also wants to avoid a divide by 0 error in the calculation. He already has entered an if error function. Complete the formula as follows. So if I look over here, percent of total, they've already started off a function with if error. So apparently they don't trust us to use the if error function ourselves, so they're giving us a head start. And we have an if error, but we're missing the value parameter of the if error function. An if error is pretty much like an if function. If it's true, we do one thing, otherwise we do something else. Now an if error modifies that. If there's an error, do this, otherwise do something else. And I guess they're doing that so that way in case this amount was not calculated properly or something like that. Let's see what we've got here. In cell C6, before the comma, so that first parameter right there, before the comma in the if error function, create a formula without using a function that divides the amount of automobile insurance sales, there it is, B6, by the total sales in B11, divided by B11. I bet I need to do that as absolute, so I'm going to press F4 on my Windows machine to make that an absolute reference, $B, $11. By the way, you can just type in those $signs too. If you're using a notebook computer or even some desktop computers, for the function keys up at that above your number row, you might have to press an FN key in order to switch that out. So for some of you, you may have to press the function key, FN. It's often blue, but not always. And the FN key, if you've got one, is usually in the lower left of your keyboard. I think that's pretty good. If I press my enter key, I get the percentage. I'm going to click on this. I'm going to fill it down, and I'm going to choose fill without formatting. Now, I don't know if I was supposed to fill it down the entire way. I may not have supposed to do that. Let's see. Use an absolute reference in the B11. I did that part. Okay. Use the fill handle to fill down to C10. Yeah, I went a little bit too far. Okay, so let me just Control Z to undo. And I'm going to fill this down to row 10. And I will fill without formatting. It doesn't say. So it doesn't look like I have to do anything. Yeah, so I think that's it. And there we go. Yeah, that's not so bad. I think there's something else we could have done here. I can't remember how this works. What if I didn't do this? Hold on, I'm going to delete that. I think there's an option where I can select these, click on this button here, and there's a total section, and there's a percent of total, and I can tell by the blue it puts it at the bottom. That's not what I want. I'm going to move over to the right. There's a percent of total where it puts the information over towards the right. The first one, I think it put it down near the bottom. I can see that there. This one will put percent of total on the right. I click on that. I think it ends up getting me the exact same data. However, this one is written as a sum of this one divided by the sum of the whole column, but it does it a pretty quick automated way. And I think that 23%, that looks familiar, right? Now on the very end, they do give us a picture of kind of how things look. And I'm looking at the picture here. Those aren't supposed to be bold. And they're not supposed to show the decimal places. So let me get rid of those. So 23%, 2022, 18, 17. So yeah, so that actually produces the same result. Now again, we did this in a slightly tricky way using that automated percent of total feature in Excel. And if you're going to be turning this in directly into Cengage or MindTap in order to get auto graded, it's definitely going to count you wrong on that one, right? So I wouldn't do that, but it is kind of a neat little feature. So let me, actually, I'm just going to go ahead and delete this and see if I can't reproduce what it looked like. So I think what we had here, it was definitely an equals if error. Nope, if error, there it is. And we had something, and then it was, I think, incorrect, in quotes. And then we had to change out this first part to that if error. And it was, take B6 and divide it by B11, which is going to be absolute. I think that's what it was before. And that gets us the 23%, and I fill it down to the number 10. There we go. So now we're back in business to what the assignment actually wanted. All right, I think that is it. Step 10 is the last step. Your workbook should look like the final figures down here. I know that picture is really tiny, but I'm going to just kind of glance at mine. Let me zoom out a bit. Just try to get a feel for things, and it looks pretty good. I can see the C's, the B's, and the A's. False, true, true, false. Yep, that looks good. 48, 48, 30, 31. That looks good there. Age of invoice, 78, 78. Awesome. 10, 10,406. All that is looking pretty accurate to what the picture is. So I'm going to go ahead and call this assignment done. And I'll hit save. So of course, if you're working on a class where we're using Cengage for this, or MindTap, I keep saying Cengage, I should say MindTap, you're going to be uploading that working file into MindTap, and it's going to auto grade it, and you'll kind of see what you did right or wrong, and you'll be able to correct those kinds of things. Otherwise, you're taking this in a class where you'll turn this working file into me, and I'll give it the quick once over. I'll go to your sheets, and I'll just click on some of your functions. Sometimes a trick I'll do too is I'll just go ahead and select like the top row, and I autofill it down just to make sure that you're getting those formulas written properly, and I should see all that information on there. Thanks for hanging out with me, and I appreciate that this is a challenging assignment for you, but hopefully watching this video while you're working gives you a little bit of insight, and I will talk to you later.